It's time for another edition of Graysons Grades. Scott Grayson grades the Eagles' playoff win. Not the most aesthetically pleasing win there, Scott Grayson. Scott Grayson of Fox 29. And, of course, Scott Grayson's grades are posted after every Eagles game at 973ESPN.com. He joins us now for a look at Grayson's grades. But first, I want you to grade the Nakobe Dean injury. He suffered a torn patella tendon, and what kind of impact that will have on the team. He had a career high this year in tackles for loss, sacks, turnovers forced, a major loss for the Eagles. So, Scott, let's start with that news that came out a little while ago. We knew he had the knee injury. He got carted off, but it's a torn patella, and he might miss time next season, too. How does that impact this team's run now? Oren Burks takes his spot.
Yeah, and you saw last night. Here's the one thing. Let me take the first part first. I think the Nakobe Dean injury is a serious thing. It's a big problem for this defense. The way that he reads screens, the way that he moves and reads stuff into his speed allows him to cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. And I think that is going to be an understated miss, if you will, that they're going to not have now. Because what you saw out of Oren Burks was a guy who, granted, doesn't have the reps, doesn't have the amount of opportunities to be out there learning on the fly like Nakobe Dean has had in a whole season now under Vic Fangio. And you just saw he was a little late with things. Now, the caveat to that is, well, yeah, Oren Burks didn't have all the reps with the ones. He didn't have the full film study. He obviously had the film, but he didn't have the full week of prep as a starter. That will be different this week. And I think that to a certain extent that will close the gap a little bit between, who he is and who, Nakobe Dean is. Now, I will say this. We saw it last night. Oren Burks can deliver some hits. Yeah, that one granted it was on special teams, but that was a big tone setter at the beginning of the game. So you're going to get, he's got to be a better tackler. I felt like last night, sure, thrown into the situation with Nakobe going out like he did. But, Mike, I am a little concerned about what they lose with Nakobe not out there. And that's a big credit to how hard he's worked. I mean, guys were talking about it in the locker room last night that, he worked so hard and he came in and didn't, shrug his shoulders or hang his head because he didn't have the starting job. He had to go out and win it. And he did that. And I think that earned so much respect from his teammates. And then to back it up with the way he played, I just think it's going to be such a big loss for them not to have him now.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if this opponent, the Rams or the Vikings, that it will be a factor. But if they play Detroit, I definitely think that's a matchup where Nakobe's impact. I want you to grade. Let's stay on the defensive side of the ball and kind of take a look. Nolan Smith, 2 sacks in the game. From what you're seeing from Nolan Smith the last couple of weeks here, what kind of impact is he starting to give this team? Is he a guy that is becoming kind of a guy that we can count on as the pass rusher?
Yeah, what an interesting season he's had, right? I mean, here's a guy who played a lot in the final preseason game, and if you play a lot in the final preseason game, that usually doesn't mean that you're in line for a lot of snaps. And I think he worked from that. Certainly had faced a lot of criticism for the way that last year went for him, not very productive, had things to work on. And here's the question I would say, would we even be talking about Nolan Smith today if Brandon Graham didn't get hurt? I mean, here's a guy, the classic example of next man up, right? His snap count went a lot with Brandon Graham going down. And through all those extra snaps, through the reps, you're seeing a guy get a lot more comfortable. And I see a guy who's now has a hard time taking him off the field, right? He's playing so well right now with his speed rush. He's showing some other skills that he's learned, some of the moves that he's learned to incorporate. And I think that this is a product of Brandon Graham going down, which none of us wanted to see. But I think all that extra reps, those extra time, has really led to Smith being able to take the next step in his development. And look, I mean, he was arguably the best player on the field last night for the Eagles, and that's saying a lot that he has come that far. So certainly now it's like, okay, you're there, guy. You got to keep making some plays, and now they're going to start counting on him more. And now how will he handle that? That's the next thing to watch.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because they didn't get a lot of he had the 2 sacks yesterday, and I thought the pressure that they got, there wasn't like they had 8 sacks, but like the holding penalties, constant pressure from up the middle. it just seemed like a culmination of everybody got to Love yesterday, forcing him to turn the ball over 3 times in terms of interceptions. I thought the throw to third down to Heath, he got that out. It was high. Heath has to go up for it. He can't get his feet down. And it's a byproduct of he just did not trust the line. Now, the line was banged up. They lost the guard. He got hurt. The next guy come in, though, he gets called for 3 holding penalties. They bench him. They go to the third guard in the game. And I think, the Eagles, we've been asking all season long, Scott, how do we grade that pass rush yesterday?
Well, I think a large part of that, Mike, is the physicality that this team plays with. It was like a mass unit out there of knocked down Green Bay players that couldn't finish the game. Josh Jacobs couldn't even finish the game. That's a big guy, and you knock him out. And it's all legit legal hits. Nothing they did that the Eagles did. They just, when they go to hit you, man, they're going to hit you hard, and you're going to feel it. And I think that cannot be understated, because I think nobody wants to play this team for how physical they are, because they know it's going to be 60 minutes of hell. It's just going to be a grind, and these guys are going to come after you. They're going to keep hitting you. The offensive line is going to keep wearing you down. The defensive line is going to keep wearing down your offensive line, and they're just going to keep coming. And by the third, fourth quarter, these guys are really taking away the opponent's will to want to play the game. And that, to me, that's a lost art in the game these days, right? Everything's so finesse. It's air. It's through the air. It's not ground and pound. It's not, hit hard and tackle. Everything they did last night was within the letter of the law, and they just hit guys hard, and it left a lasting impression. I mean, those guys got knocked out of the game, and I think that can't be understated. So, now, right, what is Minnesota or LA going to see on film? They're going to see a team that's coming after you and hitting you hard. It's going to be in your mind, right, when you're lining up to try to block these guys. And a guy like Jalen Carter, man, I just love watching him. This year is so much better than last year in that he's doing it at almost every play. I mean, he is making some of those guys look like ragdolls, and he's getting double teamed. This is a special player. And I think everybody on the line benefits from what he brings. And it just trickles down. Milton Williams had a good game yesterday on that line as well. Obviously, Nolan Smith, as you talked about. It's just a lot of fun to watch these guys play on defense, the way that they've taken to Vic Fangio's scheme. And I think they're going to make it tough on whoever they play, Minnesota or LA next week, in terms of how they're going to make a miserable day for that offense.
Yeah. The Eagles, how about this, though? They only blitzed once yesterday. Once. It's the lowest rate in any game since week 6 of 2015. They blitzed one time the entire day, and yet they got pressure. They batted down 5 passes in the game. They got 2 interceptions from corners. It's the first 2 interceptions from a cornerback the entire season, and then Zach Baum with the interception. But not having to blitz. So many times we hear the fans, we want you to blitz more. You got to blitz. They blitzed once yesterday.
Yeah, and I just wouldn't expect Vic Fangio to blitz a lot, right? Now he'll have a game or two where he'll dial it up a little bit more than other times, but that's just the way his nature is. He wants to confuse that quarterback and have more guys back in coverage in order to be able to make plays and potentially get some turnovers. Like Zach Baum on that one interception, he called it a dream interception, not because of who it was against, or where it was, right, in a playoff game. It was because it was that nobody sees you and boom, you just grab it in open field and be able to take it away and go the other way for a little while. That is what Vic Fangio's defense does, and that's what you saw out of Jordan Love. Now, granted, he was missing by the end of the game his running back and his top 3 receivers. So I don't know how much confidence he had in who he was throwing to, but it was as if he was seeing some ghosts and everything was sailing a little high. And, that's what they try to do is get that pressure there. And if they can do it without having to blitz, man, that's great, because now you got more guys in the back end to help you create smaller windows, more doubt for him when he goes to throw that ball. And that's what Matthew Stafford or Arnold are in for next week when they come to the link.
All right, Scott Grayson's grades. Of course, we look at the defense. They won the day. 10 points. And they got 3 turnovers from the defense, 1 from the special teams. And the Eagles' offense could not capitalize on a lot of these turnovers, but the defense kept doing its job in holding them down. And, there were so many things on defense we can continue to look at. But let's look at the offense where, I don't know, how would you grade Jalen Hurts? Does he get the low grade? Is it Kellen Moore that gets the lower grade? When you grade the Eagles' offensive attack, Hurts, Moore. Let's start with those two.
Yeah, I would give. I think I would probably give. I would give both of them C's because it was average stuff that I saw out there. There was occasionally some nice things, and then there was some things you're scratching your head, going, "What are you doing?" Like, so Jalen Hurts takes off, and you see he goes 15 yards and he slides, and you say, "Okay, man, he learned something about this." And then later in the game, he's running parallel, loses his momentum, and then goes head first. And I'm saying maybe he didn't learn anything. And then you also look at the fact that he was behind the line of scrimmage, out of the pocket, and he slides down to take a sack. What happened? Like every other quarterback, Ian Book, Kenny Pickett, Tanner McKee, they're all going to look at him in the film room like, dude, like quarterbacks know that you got to throw that away and not take a 9-yard loss, I think it was on the play. There are things that he's doing, and you can call it rust if you want to. To me, I just think it was a little bit of being a little gun shy, perhaps. But in terms of Jalen Hurts, I liked on the 7-second play. It was early in the game, right? You didn't know where he was at yet with the rust, but he took his time, kept scanning the field, and found Jahan Dotson for a touchdown. That was impressive to me. And then other times in the game, it's like this is a tailor-made throw-it-away situation. And he'll run around for a little while and then get a sack. And it's these negative yards can hurt this. Now, what I also saw was a guy who didn't want to turn it over. And I think they knew that if they don't turn it over, especially the way that game was going with the turnover differential, that they were going to win that game. It got close. But the fact that he didn't turn it over, I saw a guy who was a little afraid to try to force it in somewhere because he didn't want to have that interception. And the way that game went, I think that was an invaluable thing to do. I just like to see him take care of that ball a little bit more and not necessarily fall for sacks when he doesn't have to. Kellen Moore, on the other hand, Barkley had 9 carries in the first half. What are you doing? I mean, what are we doing here? Because you have an offensive line that can inflict punishment. And I know I saw it. And they've shown this tendency in the past. The Packers had 8 men in the box. They decide, well, okay, we're going to throw it. You know what? What about the mentality of you can put 8 guys in the box, and I'm going to take all the beef I got up front here and my running back, and we're still going to find success running the ball? Where is that? And where is the idea that we're going to wear you down in the first half so that in the second half, Saquon will break those 50, 60, 70-yard runs, the home runs, because you're just worn down as a defense having to deal with that. And so there's those times I'm going, what are you doing? Because I don't understand when Kellen Moore does that, what the philosophy is, because they'll go two downs on a new possession. They'll go first and second down and throw the ball, and it's now 3rd and 10. Well, yeah, you're probably not going to run it now with Saquon, so you're telegraphing to the defense what's coming. There's some things there that just boggle me in my mind, and I hope that today, because they don't know who they're playing yet. Nick talked about doing some self-scouting, going in there and figuring out and fixing problems. To me, that's something that needs to be corrected. They've got to get this offense into a rhythm, and that's on Kellen Moore, because I never really felt like they got into a great rhythm yesterday.
I agree with that. I didn't love the game plan. I thought there was a lot of downfield stuff. Just quick out, let the guys go, and then take your shots down the field. They want to, hit the home run early. You can wait because, as you kind of said, 9 carries early for Barkley. He ended up with 100 yards. He could have had more. He slides the game out. But, it felt like one of those games where nobody got going. I mean, nobody was in a rhythm at all. They just were so disjointed. And then all the turnovers, you couldn't cap. That game could have been 40-10.
It could have, and that's what here's an understated part of that game, right? That could have easily been a blowout in the second half. And now you're resting Saquon in the fourth quarter. You're resting that offensive line. And that's when you get in the playoffs and you get an opportunity to rest guys for even a quarter with another team that's coming in here next week on one less day of rest. That's a big difference. And you missed an opportunity for that. Only 7 points off of 4 turnovers. That's inexcusable. And they've got their third down percentage was awful. Their red zone percentage was awful. And you got A.J. Brown, I don't blame him. You might as well read a book on the sidelines because other than doing some blocking, it's like, 1 catch for 10 yards. But in the playoffs, the name of the game is survive and advance. And they did that. And they did it behind solid defense and physicality. And I think I'm at the point now where I think solid defense, and physicality could take this team to the Super Bowl. That might be enough.
Well, we'll be at Super Bowl 59 with or without the Eagles. Scott Grayson, of course, and our coverage will be live in New Orleans for the Eagles and the rest of the season, of course. And if they are there, we'll be there. And, Scott, that'll be the next time I see you or talk to you, man. I am outie tonight. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. But hopefully when I am back, it is to get ready for the Eagles in the Super Bowl as they will play either the Vikings or the Rams. The winner of that game tonight, which you could hear on 97.3 ESPN, will play in Philadelphia on Sunday, and you can hear that game on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Scott. Well, I will catch up with you down the road, buddy.
All right. Safe travels, Mike. I'll see you in New Orleans.
All right, man. Scott Grayson, of course, each and every year we are at the Super Bowl, and he will be with us again this year.